You work with a lot of founders, CEOs, tons of your friends will be in that position too. What do you make of the response to the Brian Thompson killing and the situation more broadly?
Well, the killing itself was obviously an enormous shock, and I know people who knew him and had been with him recently. So he was a well-known figure in the healthcare industry. So a very very respected among in the sort of the business circles. Yeah, I mean, enormous shock, and then of course, at first you're just like, well, these things are either random or or most murders are committed by somebody in somebody's personal life. The way this one seems to be unfolding, is, and I don't know anything that's not in the press, but it seems to have a ideological motivation behind it, and so, and then it's like, okay, is that just a one-off, or, is this the beginning of a pattern? I would say a lot of people I talk to are very disconcerted by, I would say, the enthusiasm that a lot of people in the press are showing to. Yeah, there have been a shockingly large number of stories of the line of course, murder is bad, but
we shouldn't laugh. I shouldn't laugh.
Right. Well, I mean, it is. I mean, you have to laugh or you cry, right? So, and then it's like 3,000 words that come after the but, right? And it's like, okay, which is basically a long-winded, sort of justification for murder. And so, that is disconcerting. There are some comedians now, that have gotten in the game. And so, I would say this is fairly disconcerting. I mean, we'll see what happens. The scary scenario, I mentioned the 70s, domestic terror actually got to be quite a thing in the 70s in the US. And there's this great book called Days of Rage that kind of chronicles basically this like very widespread pattern of domestic terror, ideologically motivated domestic terror in the 70s. By many kind of sort of radical revolutionary groups, the Weather Underground and many others, what a lot of those domestic terrorists had in common was sort of this very very kind of privileged backgrounds. A lot of these were like Ivy League, like the Weather Underground came out of Columbia University, and then domestic terrorists coming out of places like UC Berkeley, and then sort of very privileged, often very privileged backgrounds, very kind of upper kind of elite upper middle class people. And then, ended up in some cases going on the lam for years, being hunted by the FBI. And there were years in the 1970s when there were thousands of terror bombings a year. And then there was a run of, anti-corporate, basically murder and terrorism in Germany, kind of through that period into the 80s, with this thing called the Baader-Meinhof group and so forth. And so, there's always been this kind of violent edge to kind of call it the anti-corporate, anti-business, anti-industrial, kind of. By the way, a little bit of that, some of that's on the left, some of that's on the right. There's different, you can squint different ways. Ted Kaczynski was on the right. This guy maybe appears to be a little bit more on the left. And so, this pattern has unfolded before. I don't know that it's ever been effective at causing any of the change that its proponents seem to want. It seems to, these tactics, violent tactics usually backfire in our societies. But certainly hope that this doesn't become a copycat situation. And I do think it's striking. I mean, I think there are a lot of voices in American public life who are behaving quite irresponsibly right now.